Hello everyone. It would seem that there's an interest for Warzone content on my channel. I am surprised by this as I thought people were tired of me talking about Call of Duty. Well, if that's the case, I have plenty more to talk about and we'll get right to it. Let's go and start with the problems of Warzone, other than the obvious. I think the biggest problem of Warzone is the pros. To be fair, this problem is not unique to Call of Duty. It's a problem with really any game that has a competitive element to it, but in Warzone's case, I think it's a bit worse than some of the others that I can think of. As with any of the other games where a competitive element is present, all it takes is a pro or two to do something, create a build, or one of those things to essentially start a meta. It becomes a meta because people see them doing it and then they think, oh, well, this is the way forward, let me copy this. At this point, it's now a bandwagon. It's near impossible to break bandwagons because people get so fixated on the pros that they refuse to hear anybody else. They'll just laugh at you if you try to tell them otherwise. So the way that this would get fixed is if the people who are labeled as pros recognize this and do something about it. There's two ways that this can be fixed. One is being upfront about it, and the other is recommending other people. By being upfront, I'm talking about saying something like, this is the build that works for me. I recommend that you try other guns or other attachments. That's being upfront. That's letting people know that this is a build specific to you. Recommending people is another way of fixing the bandwagon. As I just mentioned, it's hard to break a bandwagon because people get so fixated on pros that they won't hear other people. So you could recommend any number of the Call of Duty testers, assuming that they're reputable. Exclusive Ace would probably be the best one to recommend, so that you can let people know he has tons of information that would differ from the pros. I would say me as well, but I recognize that I may not be the best person for that. I certainly do a good job with my builds, but I do think that there might be better people out there. So, yeah. The pro problem does also relate to some of the other problems in the game, indirectly or directly. Ground loot is an example of indirect, or, well, I guess quasi-indirect. Because the ground loot weapons have such random attachments that don't really apply to the purpose of the gun, it results in those guns not being friendly to a player. All it takes is one bad experience with a player for them to immediately call it trash and then cast it aside. AK is a perfect example of this. AK has a ton of recoil, and people don't understand that you have to control the recoil by firing in bursts. If you try to full auto it like an M4, you're not going to have a good time. Yet people insist on doing that. So, yeah. And then the ground loot itself affects, well, or has a link to another problem. Warzone is free to play, but multiplayer you have to pay for. That presents a problem because it means that people who just want to play Warzone and join in on the free to play don't really have a good way to grind out the weapon levels. Because the ground loot is so bad, they can't rely on that either. It puts free-to-play players in a bad position. If this was like Apex, it would be a different story in which guns are leveled with each other, but no, it's not that case. The free-to-play players are up against people who have full builds and everything, so it doesn't put them in a good position. Okay, with some of the problems mentioned, let's go ahead and talk about what I think can be done to fix the ground loot problem. I think that you can create a blueprint series. One will be within the game files specific to the ground loot, and the other one would be a purchasable blueprint series. So you can notice here that I've created a brand new Google document to show some builds that I think would be perfect for blueprint series regarding ground loot. In this, I had a focus. I wanted to ensure that all builds were player friendly and had good stats. This means I avoided attachments as much as possible that would increase ADS speed way too much or lower movement speed too much and things like that. I of course made certain exceptions, to make things easier, because that's the goal, is to make things easier so people don't judge a gun too quickly. Let's go and go over a few examples so you can see where I'm going with this. You'll notice that I don't normally recommend the HDR with a 26.9 inch as it already has insane bullet velocity and range, but to make it as friendly as possible, I decided let's go and chunk it in there. The Stalker Scout's in there to help with the aim stability. Monolithic Suppressor is in there just because I don't really have too much else to do, and it increases range a little bit. Focus is there for the flinch resistance. Bipod's in there because, again, I don't really have too much to do with it. It's not like it helps anyways to a certain degree. I'll have to do some more testing, but something I'm starting to recognize is something to do with the flinch mechanics. So flinch is when you're using a sniper and somebody's shooting at you. Your scope will bloom upwards when you're getting shot at. I've noticed that recoil attachments, or recoil control attachments, help in that scenario on top of having the focus perk. So not only did I not have another good attachment to put in here, but I also think it does help with the problem that I was mentioning. Over here I just left it as no attachment or optic. I know some people would want the variable zoom scope or the thermal scope. I don't agree with those, as they just increase the ADS time or even more than it already is. This 26.9 inch barrel is adding way too much ADS time as is. So I would prefer no attachment there, but if you absolutely have to, then I'll compromise and say you can put an optic on that. And there you have it. Yeah, and so you can see where I'm making exceptions with the builds once you compare it to the other one. There's also a theme going on here. You'll notice with the PKM and, well, the AK, because I did have the AK in here for a little bit, but I decided to make it all Russian optics to keep up with the theme. Why not? It's not like that's the optics I would use anyways, more than likely. Depends on how I'm feeling that day. But yeah, the other theme here is that all of these guns are ones with good stats, time to kill, ADS time, and all that. Range, of course, too, is also factored in. I wouldn't normally recommend the P90, but it's in here because I do recognize that in order to break the bandwagon, we're going to have to get people to appreciate other guns. So to get them off the MP7, I've decided to throw a P90 in here. If the Vector or the Galil do well, then I'll chunk it in this Google document, but for now that's where we're at. This would be the blueprint series unique to the ground. For now, we'll just call it the number series. The master series would have a would be purchasable in the store, so you can use it as a loadout. And it would have like a better paint scheme. The bundle could come with tracers, charms, or something like that to make it more appealing to players who want to get the builds here, or at least a modification of these builds in their loadouts. So you can even see that I've done that here, create a number in Master Series. Here are my reasons for it. I just mentioned a few of those. If you like it, the idea or this particular document, but want to see changes, you can bring that up to me. If you think that this can get a green light right off the bat, then let's go ahead and get this to Joe or Ashtonus. But yeah, that's the ground loot thing. Okay, now for an update. For a while on this document, I took out the AK to see if I could figure out a better way of doing a build for it. People weren't using the AK builds I was providing. I had a feeling it had to do something with it not being friendly enough or something. So I took another look at it and redid the build. I think in order to make the AK more appealing and for it to have more of a job in Warzone, it should be treated as a weapon support. It's really hard to get the AK ADS time down to another AR's level, so I say screw it, just treat it as weapon support. A happy medium between an AR and an LMG like the S87. That's how I'm doing it. For that reason, I have the 23-inch Romanian barrel in now for the recoil control and range. Everything else after is all essential to keeping either the ADS speed fast or helping you to kill your enemy. That build should be as even more friendlier than the last one. Due to the Renetti nerf, I have now included my Ram 7 close quarters build. Normally I would put an optic on a gun that does have 25 meter or greater range, but I didn't have room for it. I know people prefer their monolithic suppressor when in close quarters, so I had to make room for that. Because it has a monolithic suppressor on it, that means I can't put a muzzle brake on it. For that reason, I put a Ranger foregrip on it to help with the recoil. Everything else is pretty straightforward. So yeah, you can see that I've definitely been busy. Crap, I see I forgot to bring it up, but here, let's go and bring it up real quickly. Come on, internet, let's go. Galil Ace, yep, there we are. Okay. My bad. Okay, the data mining and links indicate one of two possibilities with the Galil. At this point, though, it's pretty much confirmed that the Galil is going to be one of the two Season 4 weapons. Quite possibly a third if that anti-material rifle gets put in. I really hope it doesn't, though. But for now, let's just go and look at the Battle Pass weapons, because I get a feeling that if there's 3 weapons, 1 will be part of the base game, and 2 will be part of the Battle Pass. But anyways, one of 2 possibilities with the Galil is that it'll be a 22 model or a 31 model. If it's 22, that means it's likely going to be 5.56, though COD has shown it does not understand how to use real-life information as a compass when creating guns. So all I have to say about this is no, I do not want to see another 5.56 or Russian 7.62. I want to see another 7.62 by 51 NATO. On top of that, the NATO does have a 20.1 inch barrels. That would certainly help, as we need more ARs with longer range. That should be well, I should say that, yeah, would or should be the function of the Galil. If the Galil does get added, then it needs to be able to challenge the Grau at a distance, while still maintaining under 600 millisecond TTK. That's the problem with a lot of these guns, is that they don't have good range, but they have good TTK, so they kind of make up for it in that realm. But it would be nice to see a gun that actually has good range and good TTK. One that's actually meant for Warzone. I would hope the Galil achieves that. As for the Vector, if the Vector does get added, then it needs to do equal or better than a P90. When it comes to the SMGs under the 600 millisecond TTK time frame, the P90 has the highest range. You could say that the Striker 45 with hollow points can do better, but it has a very small magazine and requires much more precision than a lot of the players are capable of in Warzone. For that reason, I don't count that as being a ranged SMG under 600 millisecond TTK. The P90 has a 50 round magazine and 19 meter range, which makes it very easy to use for players. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. If the Galil or Vector do well, I'll add it to my documents. Not just this one, the Warzone ground loot fix one, but also my primary document. For now, that's all I have. Thank you for listening.